And we are back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. My next guest is somebody I happen to know rather well. He has a distinguished career in several fields, among them broadcasting. He was a producer for the Tom Hartman program, I believe, on both TV and radio. And speaking of TV and radio, he also has the distinction of being executive producer of the Zero Hour, that highly influential program. But he's added something else to his resume now. He is a member of the Democratic Boss Committee, or whatever they call it, state committee in West Virginia, and he is running for the West Virginia House of Delegates. So I welcome to the program Troy Miller. Troy, welcome to the Zero Hour.
Richard, it's always a pleasure to be here and on screen and on mic with you, because I'm always here in the background anyway.
So you are always here, and here's what I figured we'd talk about. It's very timely right now. People keep talking about, of course, in an election year, how Democrats can win so-called swing states and red states. And you live in West Virginia. As you know, I have a great feeling for West Virginia and Appalachia in general. And in fact, you may not know this, but my great-grandfather was a Kentuckian of some note. And yeah, I've felt for a long time, as I think you have, that Democrats are going about it in the wrong way. And now you're sort of part of a living laboratory to test that theory. So why don't we start with that? What's your platform?
Well, my platform is, let me step back and say I'm running for House of Delegates here in West Virginia for the 98th district, which is a rural district in Jefferson County, not within 2 hours of Washington, D.C., but still a very agriculturally geared county. So a very rural district within a pretty rural county. Within that, I am running for one of 100 seats of these single member districts in West Virginia. And Democrats, as you've pointed out, especially in West Virginia, we have our own sort of separate story of how Democrats lost power in West Virginia that's part and parcel with the national story of how Democrats started losing in rural areas. It definitely dovetails with Thomas Frank's work on like what's the matter with Kansas and all this, but it's also distinct in that Democrats did have complete control of the state for 80 years or so, and it really was their power to lose. And I think we'd be remiss as Democrats today to not be able to own up to the fact that the Democrats over that time did not deliver on a lot of what Democrats say we're going to deliver on. So the platform for my campaign is really a return to New Deal, not just promises, but New Deal policies and New Deal, a vision for moving West Virginia and America forward. And it's grounded in what's called the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights. And PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, head Alan Minsky and Professor Harvey Kaye really drafted this a few years ago and put it out and said, you know, Democrats need to embrace this as a bold vision. It's based on FDR's 1944 introduction of a second Bill of Rights, or an economic Bill of Rights, moving beyond I don't want to call them simple, but the political rights enumerated in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights. So those are, and I think these have universal appeal. And as I've talked to people, both within politics and outside of politics, that absolutely resonates. What we're saying is every piece of legislation that goes through the West Virginia legislature should be working to advance one of these things, or multiple one of these things. And those are a job that pays a living wage, the right to a voice in the workplace through a union and collective bargaining, the right to comprehensive quality health care. And I will say, in my mind, this does include abortion access and reproductive freedom. That is absolutely a part of comprehensive quality health care. And I've seen some people push back on this after I finish the list. the right to a complete cost-free public education and access to broadband internet. And that leaves open discussion. What are we saying is a complete public education? There's a lot of discussion to be had through these, but every piece of legislation can work towards them. The right to decent, safe, affordable housing, the right to a clean environment and a healthy planet, the right to meaningful resources at birth and a secure retirement, the right to sound banking and financial services, the right to an equitable and economically fair justice system, and the right to vote and otherwise participate in public life. And again, these are things that, looking at housing, for instance, West Virginia has one of the highest rates of home ownership in the country, but that is not, doesn't tell you much about the quality of the housing that represents. There are certainly places all across the state and within my district alone where, yes, people are housed and they might even own that housing, but they might not have the means to get the roof repaired when it needs done, or things like this that make it actually safe housing so that they're not being subjected to a slow death by black mold and mildew and all of this. So, and it's very important to me that we are able to take each of these rights and identify the concrete ways that we can both advance them and that people are lacking them right now. And that I think it's a really good document. This is also a part of the West Virginia State Democratic Platform. As you said at the beginning, I'm a member of the West Virginia State Democratic Executive Committee and a member of the local county executive committee. I will say that I feel better about running my campaign this year. There was no Democrat on the ticket in 2022 because there was just nobody who stepped up, and the guy who had been the incumbent had been there for 6 cycles and basically just, he'd get 60% of the vote every time. It's an open seat right now, but beyond that, I'm feeling more and more confident that the West Virginia Democratic Party is starting to get its messaging back under it and take back our own story and tell what we're fighting for, rather than constantly being led around by the nose by our opposition who accuse us of whatever horrible thing. And we end up getting caught in the news cycle on that. And voters don't necessarily know what our platform actually is. And I think this is a solid.
Let me just
please.
interrupt you for a second for clarification there. When you say the Democratic Party is finally taking control of its narrative, are you speaking of the National Democratic Party or the West Virginia Democratic Party?
I was speaking in that case specifically about the West Virginia Democratic Party. And I think we had really, when you look at the history, we really started losing at the end result of like 20 years of really embracing that neoliberal center, for lack of a better phrase. The idea that government can't deliver, and so we should find ways to make government more efficient, i.e. privatize services, that then becomes privatization of services that ends up saving nobody any money, and the services just get worse anyways. The services may be good. This is interesting. West Virginia, for instance, has one of the highest insured rates for health insurance in the country. We also have one of the worst outcomes for health outcomes in the country, which just goes to show you that insurance, this access to healthcare idea, is really meaningless unless people can actually get the care that they need. And if you don't have the care providers because of the monopolization of rural hospitals, this goes on. And so I think the West Virginia Democratic Party is really starting to coalesce around the fact that we are the party that, as a national Democratic Party and as a state Democratic Party, that built every piece of care infrastructure in this country. And the Republicans are the party who always want to either privatize it or just outright take it away. We are the party that has stood for democracy and expanding the right to vote and ensuring a safe vote. Everybody who is able and eligible to vote should be able to vote easily, right? Which is not to say blank carte blanche, let everybody who votes under as many aliases as possible. That's absurd. That's the type of talk that we end up getting led around the nose on. No, what we're saying is every eligible citizen should be able to vote easily, and be assured that their vote is going to count the way they've cast it. And then also, we are the party for working class people. We are the party that's fighting for every single person to have these rights enumerated in the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights. At the national level, I think we're seeing it a little bit more too. I think what Biden has done is significantly more worker forward and anti-monopoly than I would have expected out of this administration over the last 4 years. We're facing a real test, as you know, as the billionaires come forward to throw money at Kamala's campaign, Vice President Harris's campaign, and say, "Oh, by the way, this Lena Khan person's got to go." And I think there's a real test to see how strong the National Democratic Party is. And I've served on the platform committee for the DNC as our one person from West Virginia sent there to basically with the mandate to promote the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights on that platform. I'll say it's not in there in this language where you have work to go to get that as simply as possible there, but we are moving. I think everything within that platform that I've seen of the draft platform and that we voted on as a committee, you can connect them back to these rights. And now the National Democratic Party just needs to get out in front and say, these are the rights we're fighting for, and these are all of the things that connect directly to them in our platform.
Yeah, as you know, I am a big critic of the Democratic Party.
As well you should be, as well we all should be. That's how we make it a better party.
Sure, and it strikes me that you all in West Virginia are in a unique position, because I think in many ways the Democratic leadership has sold out the party to the highest bidder, even in the primary process. We're seeing that with the kind of money being thrown at progressives, $14 million in Jamal Bowman's race and so on. But because the national leadership and the PACs and the billionaires basically think West Virginia is unwinnable.
Correct.
This is my take. Tell me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that then they've just kind of left you alone, and you can actually experiment with different messages. I know there was an attempt with West Virginia Can't Wait, which was a slate of progressive candidates. I'm trying to remember now, was it 2020 or thereabout, 2018 maybe? I don't know. But
and they were nonpartisan slate of candidates, and they still are around. They are still doing, I think, good work around the state in much more local settings. And there's a number of candidates who have been endorsed by them this cycle. I did not seek their endorsement, and there's no slight to them or anything. I simply didn't seek their endorsement. But what I think is, and I want to jump in and say, is one of the things we've been up against as Democrats in this state is that there was one statewide elected Democrat for a long time, and that was Senator Joe Manchin. And I don't want to beat up on him now that he's an independent. But I think that we're up against this story that basically whatever Senator Joe Manchin said about the West Virginia Democratic Party and whatever he said about the West Virginia citizenry in general was what the national media was going to take with. And it was difficult to challenge this narrative. And because of the way he operated the Democratic operation here in West Virginia, I believe we're looking at the hollowed out bench that we have been dealing with since 2020, 2018, where we're struggling to fill people up and down the ballot. People have largely, there's a lot of party switching. There's a lot of opportunism. There's a lot of people who were Democrats who are now Republicans who, for instance, I believe the candidate for state auditor was a Democrat up until 2 years ago or so. He's a Republican now, and he's running against an actual auditor and the first Black woman to win a statewide primary, Marianne Clater, a few years ago for this auditor position, who is a really strong candidate. But we have a lot of uphill battle. And I was recently on Tom Hartman's program, and I said it's a very exciting time to be a West Virginia Democrat. And I also said that we have a good chance to win this district in District 98. I also think we have good chances around the Eastern Panhandle and other places around the state. But I want to be crystal clear. I'm under no delusion that we're going to vote for that the electoral votes for West Virginia are going to go to Kamala Harris. They're
Right.
going to go to
Right.
Donald Trump. We have our work cut out for us, absolutely. But I also think we have a huge window of opportunity to talk to people about what we earnestly believe and to get out in front again with these are the things we're fighting for, and name those and always return to them and not get shook when we're accused of one thing or another, or when the Republicans are trying to distract us with, I don't ever want to call them culture war issues, because they're attacking real people and they're causing real harm, but they're also doing it while they're picking the state's pockets and doing long-term harm to people vulnerable groups who are reliant on government services public services for one reason or another. And
And I
that
would
to me is
say,
unacceptable. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and I would say that the culture war, that when Democrats don't speak to people's needs and issues, that leaves an opening. They feel powerless, so at least there's something they can get riled up about and have a voice about. First of all, I want to say, in the spirit of you're not saying anything unkind about Joe Biden, I'll say something. I mean, about Joe Manchin, I'll say something nice about him too. He has a really nice boat. I've seen it, and in the Anacostia River here in D.C. So, but I guess in a minute or two we have left in this huge question, so I don't expect you to nail it down. But there've been some great here and there good candidates in West Virginia on the Democratic side. I mean, we know Democrat is kind of a curse word a little bit, so you're dealing with that. But Zach Shrewsbury ran in the primary. He came on the program, good working class, regular people kind of candidate. What's it going to take to break through and really start winning some races there in West Virginia? Because if once that happens, it can be a model for other
Correct.
places.
Yeah. Well, I'll step back and say, first of all, anyone listening to this can go to my website at www.troy4wv.com. And you can sign up for updates and donate and all of that kind of thing there, which would be hugely appreciated. But and we need people finding candidates in these areas. When we're talking about millions of dollars being raised by a single person for Kamala Harris, that is huge. That alone could flip several seats in a place like West Virginia. The amount of money that the other side has to spend to maintain, and they're spending a ton of money in West Virginia. I mean, and anytime somebody says this is an unwinnable state and this is always going to be red, and that's because of how the voters are and everything like this, I will call BS on that, and I will say, look at how much money they have to spend in order to ensure these races. Look at how much money is being spent on making sure that Patrick Morrisey will be governor for the Americans for Prosperity camp of people. And tell me that they think that this is sewn up. It is absolutely not sewn up. I think it is getting easier to be a rural Democrat as national Democrats and everyone else are standing bold on these issues. I think when you look at places like North Carolina and what Anderson Clayton's state party there is doing and how they're building in Western North Carolina, which is true Appalachia. When you look at, I think Governor Beshear would be a fantastic vice presidential candidate. And I think Appalachia is I think there is a sense that Appalachia is a serious force in American politics for the first time in my lifetime, with J.D. Vance being brought on as the vice presidential ticket there. I think that's a clear play towards that. And I think the Democrats absolutely at the national level, and I will be making this case at the DNC to anybody who will stand to hear me again, that we need to be investing in Appalachia in ways that we have not done in West Virginia, and more than just, we've done great investment through actual law. There's $16 billion coming in because of the Inflation Reduction Act into West Virginia. That's incredible. But we need investment in the down ticket races too, where my opponent is going to spend tens of thousands of dollars, or a PAC is going to spend that. If they spend upwards towards $100,000, that would be incredible how much I'd make them spend on this race. But we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars. So that is all to say, unfortunately, in this broken system we have until we get real campaign finance reform and repeal Citizens United. Little donations to your favorite candidates go a long way.
Yes, well, and I get the message. So and I imagine
I'll also interrupt and say little donations to your favorite media outlets like the Zero Hour with Richard Eskow and others go a long way too. And thank you so much.
That they do. And Troy Miller, candidate for House of Delegates in West Virginia and producer extraordinaire, thanks so much for doing all that. And I don't thank you enough. And thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to recording the rest of the program with you.
Yeah, let's get to work. Okay, and I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.